The young boy from Minnesota had been playing outside in the fresh snow, and when his parents checked on him, he'd vanished without a trace. 8 years later, his father looks under the neighbor's dog kennel, and what he sees makes his blood run cold. Maple Hollow, nestled in the northern reaches of Minnesota, was a small town known for its tight-knit community and brutal winters. With a population of barely 2,000 residents, it was a place where everyone knew each other's business, shared their sorrows, and celebrated their joys together. The town had always prided itself on its safety and low crime rates. Children played freely outdoors, neighbors left their doors unlocked, and the community functioned like an extended family. That was until 8 years ago, when 5-year-old Joshua Coulter vanished without a trace. On a cold Saturday morning, as snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, Ethan Coulter sat at his dining table sorting through police documents. The papers had become a familiar presence in their home: reports, witness statements, and potential leads that ultimately led nowhere. His eyes occasionally drifted to the window overlooking their front yard, where his thoughts inevitably returned to that fateful day. His wife, Claire, moved about the house, the rhythmic sound of her cleaning providing a background to his thoughts. The simple act of housework seemed to give her a sense of normalcy, something to occupy her hands and mind. Despite the years that had passed, their home still felt suspended in time, waiting for their son to return. "Still going through those?" Claire asked as she passed by with a basket of laundry. Ethan nodded, shuffling through another stack of papers. Detective Palmer said they received a couple of new tips last month. Nothing substantial, but... He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both lived on these fragments of hope, however small. Joshua had been 5 years old, a bright red-headed boy with a laugh that filled their home. That winter morning, he had begged to play outside in the freshly fallen snow. Ethan and Claire had let him, as they had done countless times before. Their property bordered a small wooded area that was familiar territory for local children. Ethan had promised to check on him in 20 minutes. When he went outside, Joshua was gone. The search that followed was unlike anything Maple Hollow had ever seen. The entire town had mobilized. Search parties combed the woods. Divers checked the frozen lake half a mile away. Police interviewed every resident. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually, the active search was called off. But Ethan and Claire never stopped looking. The doorbell's chime pulled Ethan from his thoughts. He rose from the table, straightening his sweater as he made his way to the front door. When he opened it, he found Harold Stevens, their neighbor from across the street, standing on their porch. Harold was a tall man in his late 40s with prematurely graying hair and a perpetually serious expression. He had lived in Maple Hollow for over 20 years, but in the decade since losing his wife and son in a home invasion, he had become increasingly reclusive. "Morning, Ethan," Harold said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Sorry to bother you, but the snowstorm last night destroyed part of your fence again. It blew over onto my property." Ethan immediately began to apologize. "I'm really sorry about that, Harold. That old fence has been giving us trouble for years. I'll come by and take it off your property, but I'll need to get a welder first. Mine's broken, and I haven't had the time to buy a new one." Harold waved dismissively. "Don't worry about it. I already patched it up. I just came by to let you know." Ethan was surprised and felt a twinge of awkwardness. "You didn't have to do that. Thank you." "No problem," Harold replied with a slight shrug. "I had the tools and was working on something in the back of the house anyway." "Yeah, I heard some noise earlier this morning. Guessed you must be building something back there." Harold didn't elaborate on what he had been constructing, simply saying, "Sorry if the fence doesn't look as good as new." "It's an old fence anyway," Ethan assured him. "Thank you again." Harold nodded and turned to leave. As Ethan closed the door, he found Claire coming in from the backyard, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Was that Harold?" "I heard," she asked, unwinding a scarf from around her neck. Ethan nodded. "Our fence blew down again. He fixed it himself." Claire hung her scarf on a hook by the door and smiled faintly. "It's been a while since we've gotten together with Harold. We should invite him to dinner as a thank you for fixing the gate." Ethan hesitated. "I don't know, Claire. We still need to go through some of these police reports about the new leads for Joshua. I'd rather focus on that during dinner, not when we have company." Claire's expression softened with a mixture of sadness and gentle reproach. "Ethan, we've become so isolated and lonely over these 8 years. When was the last time we invited someone over?" "Years ago." Ethan didn't answer immediately, knowing she was right. They had gradually withdrawn from social connections, their search for Joshua consuming every aspect of their lives. "Harold, too," Claire continued. "Look at how private he's become after his wife and son died in that home invasion 10 years ago. Can you imagine living all alone for years? He must be a lonely man." She paused, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "It might be good to sit down and have dinner together. We've all gone through similar experiences of loss. Maybe we could form a new bond." Ethan considered her words, his gaze drifting back to the stack of documents on the table. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps they both needed this small step toward normalcy. "All right," he finally said. "I'll go invite him for dinner tonight." Claire's smile was worth the concession. It had been too long since he'd seen genuine happiness on her face. Ethan zipped up his jacket and stepped outside into the crisp winter air. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he crossed the street toward Harold's house. It was a modest 2-story home, similar to most in their neighborhood, though somewhat less maintained. The paint was peeling in places, and the snowfall had been left untended, piling up in recent years. When he reached Harold's front door, Ethan knocked firmly and waited. After a minute with no response, he knocked again, louder this time. "Still nothing." He was about to turn and leave when he heard sounds coming from behind the house. A dull thudding noise, like someone hammering. Ethan rounded the corner of the house, and his boots sinking into the deeper snow of the backyard. "Harold!" he called out. "It's Ethan from across the street." The sounds led him to a small wooden structure at the far end of the yard, an old dog kennel that had been there for as long as Ethan could remember. Harold was crouched inside it, seemingly adjusting something. At the sound of Ethan's voice, Harold froze momentarily before carefully backing out of the small structure. "Ethan, Harold Said, sounding slightly breathless. Sorry, I didn't hear you knocking." "No problem," Ethan replied, noticing how quickly Harold had straightened up and positioned himself in front of the kennel. "I'm surprised you're still keeping that old doghouse. It's been years since you had a dog, hasn't it? Do you want help tearing it down?" Harold's response came with a slight stutter. It's a reminder of Rex. He was a good dog. I like keeping it around." Ethan nodded, understanding the sentiment. People clung to different reminders of those they'd lost. Harold gestured to a partially built, larger structure nearby. "Actually, I've been thinking about getting a new dog. I've been working on that for a few weeks now and wanted to complete it this morning." Ethan's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Seriously? You're still working in this weather? That's impressive, Harold. I used to breed dogs myself when I was younger, more of a hobby than a job really. What kind of breed are you thinking about?" "I haven't thought much about it," Harold replied, seeming more relaxed now that the conversation had shifted. "Maybe a puppy or a mid-sized dog." "Well, Claire and I actually wanted to invite you to dinner tonight," Ethan said. "But if you don't mind, I could help you finish that new kennel this morning, and we could go find a dog together afterward. I know a local breeder in the area." Harold seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. I'd appreciate that. I should be able to finish this in a few hours, and dinner sounds nice. Thank you. As they talked, Ethan noticed Harold occasionally glancing back at the old doghouse. There was something odd about his neighbor's behavior, but Ethan couldn't quite place what it was. Harold had always been a private person, especially after his tragedy. So perhaps it was just his discomfort with the unexpected social interaction. Great, I'll leave you to it then, Ethan said, taking a step back. Just come over when you're ready to head out to the breeder, and we'll see you for dinner around 6. Harold nodded, already turning back toward the doghouse. I'll see you then. As Ethan walked back across the street, he couldn't shake a strange feeling. There was nothing overtly suspicious about their interaction. Harold had been perfectly cordial, if a bit awkward. Yet something felt off. Perhaps it was just the unusual sight of his reclusive neighbor suddenly making plans for a new pet after years of solitude. Or perhaps it was just the oddity of someone doing all that woodworking out in the snow. Reaching his own front door, Ethan brushed the thoughts aside. People processed grief differently, and if Harold was finally taking steps to move forward with his life, that could only be a good thing. Ethan entered his house, stamping the snow from his boots in the entryway. Claire was in the living room, straightening up the scattered throw pillows and magazines that had accumulated over the week. He said yes to dinner, Ethan announced, hanging his jacket on the hook by the door. Claire's face brightened. That's wonderful. What time should I expect him? Around 6, I think. You know what's interesting? He's building a new doghouse and planning to get a dog. I offered to take him to a breeder this afternoon. Claire paused in her tidying and looked up with genuine surprise. A dog? After all these years? She smiled thoughtfully. See? I told you he must be feeling lonely. Getting a pet is a good first step toward healing. Ethan returned to the dining table where he'd left the police documents. I suppose so. It's just unexpected. He's kept that old doghouse all these years as a memorial of sorts. Claire resumed her cleaning, moving into the kitchen. Now, people find different ways to move on. Speaking of which, we need groceries for dinner tonight. We're running low on everything, and I want to make something special. Ethan sighed quietly, looking down at the stack of papers before him. He'd been hoping to spend the morning reviewing the new leads, compiling his thoughts before the week ahead consumed his time again. Can you grab what we need? I'd really like to get through these documents today. If you don't mind, can you help me with the grocery run instead? Claire asked. I want to clean the house properly for tonight, and you know I don't drive well in this weather. It's too cold to walk or wait for the bus. Ethan looked at his wife's hopeful expression and felt a familiar pang of guilt. She asked for so little these days, and she'd been the one to suggest reconnecting with their neighbor, a small but significant step toward normalcy. All right, he conceded. I still have some time before Harold's ready to go to the breeder anyway. I'll do the grocery run, drop everything back here, and then head out with him if he's ready. Claire's grateful smile was worth the sacrifice of his morning plans. She quickly wrote out a shopping list, adding items as she checked the pantry and refrigerator. Ethan headed outside again, shoveling a path from their front door to the driveway before starting the car. He let the engine idle for a while to warm up, his breath curling into small clouds in the crisp cold air. As he was about to pull out of the driveway, he noticed Harold crossing the street toward him. Ethan. Harold called, approaching the car window. Ethan rolled down the window. Hey, all set with the doghouse already? Harold shook his head. Actually, I just remembered I already have plans to meet with some friends this morning. I'll have to cancel our trip to the breeder, but I'll still come for dinner tonight. No problem at all, Ethan replied, surprised that the reclusive Harold had social plans. I'm just heading out for groceries. We'll see you at 6. Harold nodded and turned back toward his own house. Ethan watched him go, that strange feeling returning. In all the years they'd been neighbors, he'd never known Harold to mention friends or social gatherings. But then again, they hadn't exactly been close in recent years, both families retreating into their private sorrows. Ethan drove to the supermarket, his mind toggling between thoughts of Joshua and mental notes of what to buy. The grocery store was relatively empty for a Saturday, most people likely deterred by the weather forecast predicting more snow later that day. He methodically worked through Claire's list, adding a few items he knew she liked but had forgotten to write down. As he loaded the groceries into the car, heavy gray clouds were gathering overhead, promising the predicted snowfall would arrive sooner rather than later. As Ethan pulled out of the supermarket parking lot, a familiar car passed by on the main road. He did a double take, recognizing Harold's blue sedan. The car's windows were clear enough that Ethan could easily see Harold was alone, driving in the opposite direction from where their neighborhood was located. Ethan's route home followed the same road for a while, and he found himself unintentionally trailing Harold at a distance. A few minutes later, Harold's car pulled into the parking lot of Northwoods Kennels, a local dog breeder that Ethan had mentioned earlier. Ethan drove past slowly, confusion settling in. Harold had cancelled their trip together, claiming he had plans with friends. Yet here he was at the very breeder, alone. For a moment, Ethan considered pulling in as well, but what would he say? He had no right to question Harold's white lie. Perhaps the man simply preferred to choose a dog on his own, without the pressure of someone else's opinions. Or maybe he was meeting his friends there. Still, as Ethan continued home, the inconsistency bothered him. It seemed a strange thing to lie about, especially when Ethan had offered his help and expertise. But Harold had always been odd and private, more so since his tragedy. By the time Ethan arrived home, light snow had begun to fall again. He unloaded the groceries quickly and found Claire in the kitchen, already preparing for dinner. "You're back sooner than I expected," she said, taking a bag from his hands. Ethan nodded. There wasn't much traffic. And actually, I saw Harold at the kennel on my way back. "The kennel? I thought he cancelled with you." "He did," Ethan replied, setting down the remaining bags on the counter. "Said he had plans with friends, but I just saw him pulling into Northwoods Kennels alone." Claire paused in unpacking the groceries. "Well, that is strange, but it's not really our business, is it? Maybe he just wanted to look on his own first." "Maybe," Ethan agreed, though something about it still felt off to him. As they stored the groceries, Ethan glanced out the kitchen window and noticed Harold's car pulling into his driveway across the street. Harold got out and opened his trunk, revealing a metal dog kennel with what appeared to be a German Shepherd inside. From this distance and with Harold's back to him, Ethan couldn't see the dog clearly, but he could make out its distinctive coloring. "He's back already," Ethan remarked. "With a German Shepherd, it looks like." Claire joined him at the window. That was quick. He must have really connected with the dog. Love at first sight does happen, I suppose. "I suppose," Ethan said, echoing Claire's earlier sentiment. "But it's still odd. I used to be a breeder. I know these transactions usually take some time with paperwork and everything." He was in and out incredibly fast. They watched as Harold struggled to maneuver the kennel across his snowy yard, the dog making the task more difficult with its movements. "He's having trouble with it," Ethan observed. "I should go help him." Before Claire could respond, Ethan was already heading for the door. He crossed the street quickly, calling out to Harold as he approached. "Need a hand with that?" Harold's head snapped up, his expression momentarily startled. No, I'm fine," he said quickly, his tone sharper than the situation warranted. "I'll see you this evening," he added, clearly dismissing Ethan. Taken aback by the abrupt response, Ethan hesitated. All right, if you're sure. Harold just nodded, already turning his attention back to the kennel and struggling to push it through the snowy yard. Ethan returned to his house, a growing uneasiness settling in his stomach. Something about Harold's behavior seemed off. But what reason did he have to be suspicious of his neighbor? The man had been nothing but quiet, if distant, all these years. As he entered his house again, Claire gave him a questioning look. He didn't want help, Ethan explained with a shrug. Said he's fine on his own. Claire nodded, returning to her dinner preparations. Some people just don't like accepting help. It makes them feel vulnerable. I suppose, Ethan agreed, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Harold's strange behavior than simple pride. The hours passed slowly as the snow continued to fall outside, blanketing Maple Hollow in a fresh coat of white. Ethan had returned to his stack of police documents, finally able to concentrate on reviewing them. There weren't many new developments, just the same frustrating lack of concrete leads that had characterized the search for Joshua from the beginning. One report mentioned a possible sighting in a town a couple hundred miles south, but the description was vague and the follow-up investigation had yielded nothing. Another referenced a child matching Joshua's description who had been enrolled in a school in Montana under a different name, but when authorities had checked, it turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. Ethan rubbed his temples, fighting off the headache that always seemed to accompany these review sessions. 8 years of false hopes and dead ends had taken their toll, but he couldn't give up. Somewhere out there, Joshua might still be waiting for them to find him. As evening approached, Claire's cooking filled the house with warm, inviting aromas. She had prepared a pot roast with vegetables, fresh dinner rolls, and an apple pie for dessert. It was more elaborate than their usual meals, a sign of how important this small social occasion was to her. "Do you think he'll actually show up?" Ethan asked as he helped set the table. Claire arranged napkins beside each plate. "Why wouldn't he?" "I don't know. He's been acting strangely today. All these last-minute changes of plans, the way he reacted when I offered to help with the dog." Ethan trailed off, unsure how to articulate his vague misgivings. "He's probably just nervous about socializing after being alone for so long," Claire reasoned. "Let's give him the benefit of the doubt." At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Harold stood on their porch, holding a bottle of wine, his coat dusted with snow. "I hope this red is all right," he said, handing the bottle to Ethan. "Perfect, thank you," Ethan replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Come on in out of the cold." Claire greeted Harold warmly, taking his coat and thanking him for coming. The initial awkwardness of the reunion gradually eased as Claire served drinks and they settled at the dining table. The conversation remained light at first: local news, the weather, harmless topics that required little emotional investment. As they began to eat, Ethan decided to broach the subject of Harold's new pet. "So, I see you got a German Shepherd today. How's it settling in?" Harold's fork paused midway to his mouth, and Ethan noticed a subtle tension in his posture. "It's fine. Still adjusting to the new environment." "That was a quick trip to the breeder," Ethan said casually. "I saw you heading that way on my drive back from the supermarket right after you mentioned meeting up with some friends." Harold's eyes flickered nervously. "I'm sorry about that. My schedule became unpredictable. My friend cancelled last minute, and I was so excited about getting a dog that I just went ahead to the kennel." Ethan nodded, sipping his wine. "I was surprised they processed everything so quickly. When I was breeding, the paperwork alone usually took a while." Harold shifted in his chair. "Actually, I had ordered it a few days ago. I was just there to pick it up." The explanation sounded reasonable enough, but Ethan couldn't shake what he remembered from that morning. Harold had said he wasn't even sure yet whether he wanted a puppy or a mid-sized breed. And something about Harold's demeanor now, The way he avoided direct eye contact, the faint tremor in his hand as he reached for his glass, hinted at a discomfort that went deeper than simple social awkwardness. Claire, sensing the growing tension, gently changed the subject. "Harold, Ethan mentioned you lost your wife and son 10 years ago. I'm so sorry. We understand how hard it is to lose family." Harold's expression softened slightly. "Yes, it's been difficult living alone all these years." "We know something about that kind of pain," Claire said quietly. "After Joshua disappeared." She didn't get to finish her thought. Harold suddenly became visibly agitated, his gaze fixed on the window where the snow was now falling heavily. "I'm very sorry," he interrupted, "but I think I should check on my dog. It's snowing harder now, and the dog might be stressed with the adjustment." He stood up abruptly. "I'm afraid I left it outside in the kennel and I forgot to bring it inside before coming here." Ethan glanced out the window at the intensifying snowfall. "Yes, you're right. The wind's picking up too. Do you need help bringing it in?" No. Harold said quickly, almost panic-stricken at the suggestion. "The dog's a German shepherd, and it might be alarmed by strangers. Even I'm still getting familiar with it. I'll handle it and come back after I'm done." Claire rose from her chair. "Of course, just make sure your dog is safe. We live right across the street. Don't worry about rushing back if it needs your attention." Harold nodded gratefully and headed for the door, leaving his coat hanging on the rack in his haste. After he left, Ethan and Claire returned to the table, the sudden departure leaving an awkward lull in the evening. "That was strange," Ethan remarked. Claire shrugged, refilling their wine glasses. "He's concerned for his pet. It's understandable." "I suppose," Ethan agreed reluctantly. As they continued their meal, Claire sighed softly. "Ethan, imagine if I was gone too. And you had to go to work and take care of the house alone. Harold has been managing all that by himself for a decade. He must be a responsible man to care so much about his new dog. He deserves some happiness." Time passed, and Harold didn't return. The pie Claire had baked sat untouched on the counter, and the dining room grew quiet except for the occasional clink of silverware. "It's okay if he doesn't make it back," Claire said eventually. "The dog's new, so maybe he's having trouble settling it in." She began to clear the table but paused when she noticed Harold's coat still hanging by the door. "Oh, he forgot his coat. It's freezing outside." Ethan stood up. "I'll bring it back to him." Claire nodded, continuing to clear the dishes as Ethan grabbed both Harold's coat and his own before heading out into the snowy night. The snow crunched beneath Ethan's boots as he crossed the street, the cold air biting at his exposed face. Snowflakes swirled around him, illuminated by the street lights like tiny stars falling to earth. Harold's house was dark except for a faint light visible from what Ethan assumed was the kitchen at the back. He approached the front door and knocked firmly, holding Harold's coat folded over his arm. After waiting for nearly a minute with no response, he knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Ethan frowned, glancing at his watch. It had been over half an hour since Harold had left their house. Surely it shouldn't take that long to bring a dog inside, even if it was being difficult. As he stood there contemplating what to do next, a distinct barking sound came from the backyard. The dog was still outside in this weather. Concern overriding hesitation, Ethan made his way around the side of the house, calling out as he went. "Harold. It's Ethan. Are you okay? I brought your coat." The backyard was partially illuminated by the light spilling from the kitchen window. Ethan could make out the German shepherd, not inside the house as Harold had indicated was his plan, but still outside. The dog was moving restlessly in and out of its small kennel, a chain attached to its collar limiting its movement. Ethan looked around for Harold but saw no sign of him. The situation made no sense. Harold had left their dinner specifically to bring the dog inside. Yet here it was, still chained outside in the worsening weather. Approaching cautiously, Ethan noticed that the larger doghouse Harold had been constructing was still unfinished, despite his claim that morning that he would complete it. Another inconsistency in an increasingly puzzling day. "Harold." Ethan called again, louder this time. No response. He peered through the kitchen window but could see no movement inside. Harold's car was still in the driveway, and in this weather at this hour, it seemed unlikely he would have gone anywhere on foot, especially without his coat. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed Harold's number. The call went straight to voicemail after several rings. A growing sense of unease settled in his stomach. As he put his phone away, the German Shepherd suddenly began barking more intensely. At first, Ethan thought the dog was reacting to his presence, but as he observed more carefully, he realized the animal was directing its attention toward the small doghouse, alternating between barking and whining. Keeping a safe distance, Ethan moved to get a better angle on the doghouse. From his new position, he could see something he hadn't noticed before: a wooden panel in the floor of the structure that looked like it could be moved, with what appeared to be an unlocked padlock sitting on top of it. There was also a metallic glint that might be a handle of some sort embedded in the panel. Drawing on his experience with animals from his breeding days, Ethan approached the German Shepherd carefully, speaking in low, soothing tones. The dog, seemingly more distressed than aggressive, allowed Ethan to come close enough to unclip its chain from the collar and reattach it to a pole several feet away from the doghouse. With the dog secured at a safe distance, Ethan knelt down and peered inside the small structure. What he had initially taken for a simple doghouse floor was actually a sophisticated trapdoor. The metal handle and latch were reminiscent of old war bunkers he'd seen in historical documentaries. A cold feeling that had nothing to do with the winter air washed over him. Why would Harold have a bunker hidden beneath a doghouse? And why had he been so secretive and evasive all day? Ethan stood up and stepped back, his mind racing. He needed to talk to Claire. Fumbling with his phone, he dialed home. "Claire," he said when she answered, his voice tight with tension. "I found something strange in Harold's backyard. There's some kind of bunker or cellar under the doghouse." "A bunker?" Claire's surprise was evident. "What do you mean?" "There's a trapdoor in the floor of the doghouse with a handle and latch like the kind you'd see in old war bunkers. The dog is still outside, chained up, and I can't find Harold anywhere. He's not answering his phone, and his car is still here." There was a pause before Claire responded. "That sounds concerning. Do you think he might be down there? Maybe he fell or got trapped somehow." "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "The padlock on the door is unlocked, which means someone could be down there. But why would he build a doghouse over a bunker entrance? It doesn't make sense." "It could be dangerous," Claire warned. "Maybe we should call the police just to be safe. Your phone battery was low earlier, I'll make the call." Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see him. "All right, but tell them it's just a welfare check. I'm worried Harold might be in trouble down there. I can't reach him, and his house is locked. But his car is here." "Promise me you won't go down there," Claire insisted. "Come home and we'll wait for the police together." "I promise," Ethan agreed. "I'll be right back." He ended the call and cast one last look at the trapdoor. The rational part of him knew he should follow Claire's advice and wait for the authorities. But another part of him, the part that had been searching for answers for 8 long years, was drawn to the mystery beneath the doghouse. Before he could make a decision, a noise came from the bunker. A metallic sound, like someone climbing a ladder or stairs. Ethan froze, his gaze fixed on the trapdoor, which remained closed. The sounds grew louder and clearer, unmistakably footsteps on metal rungs. Then, with a scraping noise, the wooden panel moved, and the padlock fell to the side as the lid opened. Harold emerged from the opening, crawling awkwardly out of the narrow space. When he straightened and saw Ethan standing there, his face registered pure shock, quickly followed by something darker: fear? Anger? It was hard to tell in the dim light. "Ethan," Harold said, his voice carefully controlled but with an undercurrent of tension. "What are you doing here?" Ethan held up the coat. "You left this at our house. When you didn't come back, I thought I'd bring it over." He paused, then added, "I was worried when you didn't answer the door, and then I heard the dog barking. It's still outside in the cold." Harold took the coat from Ethan's outstretched hand with slow, deliberate movements. "Thanks. Yeah, about the dog. It's still not really warming up to me. I'm not so sure about bringing it inside anymore. I hope you understand." Ethan couldn't help himself. He looked pointedly at the open trapdoor. "What's down there, Harold?" Harold's posture stiffened, his expression guarded. "Nothing that concerns you." "I was looking for you," Ethan pressed. "I started to get worried when you didn't answer your phone or come to the door. Your car is here, but you weren't." Harold didn't respond directly to this. Instead, he glanced at the German Shepherd. "You moved my dog." "It was restless and kept barking at the bunker door," Ethan explained. "I moved it to calm it down." Harold's jaw tightened visibly. Ethan decided to be direct. "Why have you been lying to me all day, Harold? You said you'd bring your dog inside, but it's still out here. You said you were going to finish that larger doghouse this morning, but it's barely started. You claimed to be meeting friends when you went to the breeder alone." Ethan paused, studying Harold's increasingly agitated expression. "What's really going on?" For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the sound of the wind and the occasional whine from the German Shepherd. Then, without warning, Harold lunged forward. Ethan barely had time to react before Harold slammed into him, grabbing his jacket and pushing him backward with unexpected strength. They grappled in the snow, Harold's face contorted with a mixture of rage and fear. "You should have minded your own business." Harold snarled, landing a solid punch to Ethan's midsection. The blow knocked the wind out of Ethan, but years of physical labor had kept him strong despite his grief. He managed to block Harold's next swing and push the man off him. "What are you hiding, Harold?" Ethan demanded, circling warily now, keeping his distance. Harold didn't answer. Instead, he charged again, this time driving his knee into Ethan's stomach as they collided. Ethan doubled over, gasping, and Harold used the opportunity to shove him toward the open trapdoor. "Get in there," Harold commanded, his voice eerily calm now despite the violence of his actions. "Crawl in and go down." Ethan straightened, wincing from the pain in his abdomen. "You can't make me go down there." A chilling smile spread across Harold's face as he reached behind his back and produced a handgun. "It's either you climb down yourself, or I'll drop your dead body down. Your choice." The sight of the weapon sent a jolt of fear through Ethan, but he maintained his composure. "The police are on their way here, Harold. Claire called them when I couldn't find you. If you fire that gun, every neighbor will hear it." Frustration flashed across Harold's face, but he kept the gun trained on Ethan. Instead of shooting, he stepped forward and struck Ethan across the face with the weapon, sending him stumbling backward. Blood trickled from a cut above Ethan's eye as Harold continued to push him toward the doghouse, trying to force him to crawl into the narrow opening. Despite the pain and disorientation from the blow, Ethan fought back, grabbing Harold's wrist and twisting it until the gun fell from his grasp. In a desperate move, Ethan kicked the weapon, sending it sliding across the wooden floor of the doghouse and down into the darkness of the bunker below. Enraged, Harold charged again, but this time Ethan was ready. He sidestepped and used Harold's momentum against him, sending him crashing into the side of the doghouse.
In the distance, the while of police sirens could trug the night air.
Harold's head snapped up at the sound, panic replacing rage in his expression. Moments later, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of the house, their lights bathing the snowy yard in alternating red and blue. Officers emerged quickly, hands on their holsters, as they approached the scene of the struggle. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" one officer shouted. Both men raised their hands, though Harold did so reluctantly, his face a mask of frustration and defeat. The officers separated them, one checking Ethan's bleeding face while the other restrained Harold. "What's going on here?" the first officer demanded. Before Ethan could respond, Claire appeared, having followed the police cars from their house. "Ethan, are you okay?" she called, hurrying toward him. "I'm fine," he assured her, though the cut above his eye was still bleeding freely. Ethan quickly explained to the officers what had happened, how Harold had acted strangely all day, how he discovered the bunker beneath the doghouse, and how Harold had attacked him when confronted. "He pulled a gun on me," Ethan added. "I managed to disarm him, but the weapon fell down into the bunker." The officers looked at Harold, who remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Is that true, sir?" one officer asked him. "Did you assault this man and threaten him with a firearm?" Harold didn't respond. "We're going to have to take you in," the officer continued, reciting Harold's rights as his partner secured handcuffs around his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the officer continued the Miranda warning, another police car arrived, followed by an ambulance. Paramedics rushed to check Ethan's injuries while additional officers secured the scene. One of the officers approached the open trapdoor, shining a flashlight down into the darkness below. "There appears to be some kind of underground room here," he reported, peering down. "I can see metal stairs leading down." Before anyone could respond, a noise emanated from within the bunker.
The unmistakable sound of Somione climbing the metal stairs.
Everyone froze, officers immediately drawing their weapons and training them on the opening. The paramedic pulled Ethan back, and Claire gasped, clutching her husband's arm. The climbing sounds grew louder, more distinct with each passing second. Then, slowly, a figure began to emerge from the darkness. It was a boy, approximately 13 years old, with a mop of reddish hair that hadn't been cut in some time. He was thin, pale, and obviously frightened, his wide eyes blinking in the sudden brightness of the officers' flashlights. In his trembling hands, he held Harold's gun. The officers tensed, calling out for the boy to drop the weapon, but he seemed confused and terrified, pointing the gun wildly at the crowd of strangers surrounding him. "Dad!" the boy called out, his voice cracking with fear as his gaze found Harold.
"I won't let the enemy catch you."
"I'll protect you, Dad, and our home." His hands shook violently as he gripped the weapon.
"I want to be a soldier like you."
The officers exchanged bewildered glances, maintaining their positions but clearly uncertain how to proceed with a clearly frightened child holding a deadly weapon. "Son, put the gun down," one officer said gently. "It's not safe for someone your age to handle that." The boy's finger twitched near the trigger. "I know how to use this," he insisted, his voice trembling. "Dad taught me. The country's at war. You're the enemy. You want to take Dad and our home." Ethan stared at the boy, a strange numbness spreading through his body that had nothing to do with his injuries. There was something hauntingly familiar about the child's features, the shape of his face, the color of his hair, the set of his jaw.
"Joshua."
The name escaped Ethan's lips in a breathless whisper. The boy's eyes flickered toward him, confusion evident in his expression. Ethan stepped forward slowly, ignoring the paramedic's attempts to hold him back. "Joshua, what do you mean? We're not in a war, and Harold is not your father." He swallowed hard, hardly daring to hope. "Your mother and I are your parents." The boy's confusion deepened, his hands trembling more violently now. "You're lying," he said, though there was uncertainty in his voice. "You just want to kill us. You hate us." His voice broke. "My mom died in a war. Dad said she was shot by the military." Claire stepped forward now, tears streaming down her face. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and showed the boy the screen, her wallpaper unchanged for 8 years, showing a 5-year-old Joshua smiling widely at the camera. "You were kidnapped," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been searching for you all these years. We missed you so much, Joshua." The boy stared at the phone, his resolve visibly wavering. He looked at Harold, silently pleading for guidance or explanation, but Harold refused to meet his gaze, staring resolutely at the ground. Taking advantage of the boy's distraction, one of the officers gently approached and carefully took the gun from his unresisting hands, quickly securing and disarming it. Joshua didn't resist. He continued to stare at the photo on Claire's phone, confusion and the first glimmers of recognition washing over his face. "We're really not in a war?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. "No, sweetheart," Claire assured him, fighting to keep her voice steady. "There's no war. Harold. He pretended all these years to be your father, when your real father and mother were searching everywhere for you." Claire stepped closer, cautiously reaching out to touch Joshua's hand. The boy flinched initially but didn't pull away, allowing the contact. It was as though some deep, buried memory was stirring within him, responding to his mother's touch. The paramedics moved in, wrapping Joshua in a shock blanket and guiding him toward the ambulance. Claire followed closely, unwilling to let her son out of her sight again. Ethan watched them go, his heart pounding with a mixture of shock, joy, and disbelief. One of the officers approached him. "Sir, we need to ask you and your wife some questions, but first, let's get your injuries treated." Ethan nodded numbly, his gaze fixed on the ambulance where his long-lost son was being examined. After 8 years of searching, of hoping against hope, Joshua had been just across the street the entire time. The following hours passed in a blur for Ethan. Paramedics cleaned and bandaged the cut above his eye and examined his bruised ribs, concluding that nothing was broken. Physically, he would recover quickly. Emotionally, he was still processing the miraculous turn of events. In the back of the ambulance, Joshua sat wrapped in blankets, answering basic questions from both medical personnel and police officers. The boy's confusion was evident. His entire worldview had been shattered in a matter of minutes. When Ethan approached, Joshua regarded him with a mixture of weariness and curiosity. Claire sat beside their son, not touching him but close enough to offer comfort if he wanted it. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked gently, careful not to overwhelm him. Joshua shrugged, his eyes darting between Ethan and the officers nearby. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything's different than what Harold, told me." One of the officers, a kind-faced woman who had introduced herself as Detective Martinez, sat across from Joshua with a notepad. "Joshua, I know this is confusing, but can you tell us a little about what it was like living with Harold? Did he ever hurt you?" Joshua shook his head. "He was just training me really hard. Physical training, and recently, how to use the gun." He paused, frowning. "He said I needed to learn to protect myself for when he wasn't there anymore. He said the war would last a long time. Told me to hide deep in the bunker because things got worse out there." "Do you know what year it is, Joshua?" Detective Martinez asked gently. The boy hesitated. "Dad, Harold said it doesn't matter down there. Time works differently during wartime. It's 2007. "It's 2015, the detective informed him. "You've been missing for 8 years. Do you remember anything about where you lived before the bunker? Joshua's brow furrowed in concentration. I don't know. I've been in the bunker for as long as I can remember. Harold said it was too dangerous outside because of the war. He looked around at the peaceful, if snowy, neighborhood. But there is no war, is there?
No, Ethan confirmed softly.
There's no war. There never was. From the police car where Harold was being held, they could see him watching them, his expression unreadable. Another officer approached the ambulance. We found something interesting in the bunker, he reported. It's fully stocked with supplies, food, water, medical equipment. There's a generator, air filtration system, even educational materials. And we found several silent firearms, just as the boy mentioned. Detective Martinez nodded. Sounds like he was prepared for a long stay down there. She turned back to Joshua.
Dit Harold überlebt diese Bunker?
Joshua shook his head. Never. He said it was too dangerous. He went out for supplies sometimes and said he was helping other people who were hiding from the war. He told me that when I was old enough, I could help him. Ethan's mind reeled at the implications. Harold had kept Joshua imprisoned for 8 years, constructing an elaborate lie about a fictional war to keep him compliant and afraid to leave. The dog, Ethan said suddenly, remembering what had started this chain of events. He bought the German Shepherd to guard the entrance to the bunker, didn't he? And he was building the larger doghouse to better conceal the trapdoor. Detective Martinez nodded. That's our theory as well. Looks like he was having trouble keeping Joshua confined as he got older and more curious. The dog was meant to be another layer of security. As they talked, a forensic team arrived and began processing both the bunker and Harold's house. Officers cordoned off the property with yellow crime scene tape, and curious neighbors had begun to gather despite the late hour and cold weather. Eventually, the paramedics decided that Joshua should be taken to the hospital for a full medical examination. Years of living underground with limited sunlight and exercise would have had effects on his development that needed to be assessed. Can we go with him? Claire asked, her voice breaking slightly. Please, we just found him. The paramedics agreed, and soon they were headed to Maple Hollow Memorial Hospital, Ethan and Claire riding alongside their son. They maintained a respectful distance, understanding that for Joshua, they were still essentially strangers, despite the biological connection. At the hospital, doctors conducted a thorough examination while Ethan and Claire waited anxiously. Detective Martinez joined them, her expression grave. Harold's not saying much, but from what we've pieced together and what Joshua has told us, it seems he kidnapped your son the day he went missing. He happened to have that old war bunker on his property and built the dog kennel right on top of it, though we're not sure why. Possibly as a response to his own family tragedy. Ethan nodded. His wife and son were killed in a home invasion 10 years ago. He was never the same after that. That likely triggered whatever mental break led to this, the detective agreed.
Claire vipet avetius. 8 years of lease.
Our poor boy doesn't even know what the world is really like. The psychological recovery will be challenging, Detective Martinez acknowledged. But children are remarkably resilient. With proper support and therapy, he has every chance of adapting to normal life again. Dr. Patel, the pediatrician who had examined Joshua, approached them with a clipboard in hand. Physically, he's malnourished and shows signs of vitamin D deficiency, which is expected given the circumstances. His muscle development is below average for his age, but there are no signs of physical abuse. He appears to have been fed regularly and kept in relatively sanitary conditions. Claire covered her mouth, fighting back a sob of relief. Ethan put his arm around her, drawing her close. Can we see him? He asked. Dr. Patel nodded. Yes, But please understand that he's still processing everything. He's asked some questions about you, which is a positive sign, but don't expect immediate recognition or affection. This will take time. They found Joshua sitting up in a hospital bed, looking small and lost among the white sheets. When they entered, he looked up, his expression cautious but no longer fearful. "Hi," Claire said softly, stopping at a respectful distance from the bed. "Hi," Joshua replied, studying her face. You're really my mom?" Claire nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "And you're my real dad?" Joshua asked, turning to Ethan. "Yes," Ethan confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been looking for you ever since you disappeared. We never gave up hope." Joshua seemed to consider this. "Harold. He told me my mom died and that everyone outside was an enemy." He frowned. Why would he lie like that? Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire, unsure how much to explain. "Harold lost his own family a long time ago," he said carefully. "I think he was very sad and confused. He did a very wrong thing by taking you and lying to you." "Am I going to live with you now?" Joshua asked, a hint of anxiety in his voice. "Yes, if that's okay with you," Claire assured him. "We still have your room just the way it was. But nothing has to happen too quickly. We can take it one day at a time." Joshua nodded slowly. I don't remember you," he admitted, his voice small. "But when I saw your picture." He trailed off, uncertain. "It's okay," Ethan assured him. "We have plenty of time to get to know each other again." In the days that followed, the story of Joshua's discovery and Harold's deception spread throughout Maple Hollow. Local reporters clamored for interviews with the family that had been miraculously reunited after 8 years. Ethan and Claire declined all interview requests, focusing instead on helping Joshua adjust to his new reality. They brought family albums to the hospital, showing him pictures of his early childhood and telling him stories about his life before the kidnapping. Harold was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, and multiple weapons violations. In the wake of his arrest, investigators discovered journals in the bunker detailing his deteriorating mental state over the years and his obsession with creating a second-chance family after losing his own. Watching his son now, Ethan felt a profound mixture of grief for the years lost and gratitude for this second chance. The road ahead would not be easy. Joshua would need intensive therapy to overcome years of isolation and deception. But they were together again. After 8 years of searching, of hoping against hope, their family was finally whole.